This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
The United States and humankind. The retirement of the shuttle was kind of bittersweet for me. I'm proud of all it's accomplished, and I'm sorry to see it end. But I believe in moving on. I'd like to see us get out of Earth orbit and go back to the moon and to other destinations, and eventually to Mars. John and I got to see a lot of the development of the space shuttle firsthand. As astronauts, we were involved from an operations standpoint, and as the first crew, John and I visited the sites where they were working on the shuttle, getting it ready to fly. We had an outstanding, dedicated team, people who really believed they were doing something important for the nation. When we finally got into the shuttle for that first flight, meeting those thousands of people gave me a lot of confidence that we had a good vehicle to fly on. I never expected to be selected for that first flight. I thought they would pick someone more experienced to fly with John. I was excited that they picked me, and I was honored to be a part of that flight. All told, that flight was the beginning of something truly amazing, and I'm honored to be one of the thousands of people who made it happen. Bob Crippen. Preface. When I, David, first became involved in the Outward Odyssey series, working on the Skylab volume, my co-authors and I were shown a list of proposed titles for the first 8 books in the series. As authors working on our first book, coming up with a title seemed like one of the more exciting parts of the job. We were thus somewhat pleased to be disappointed with the working title the publisher had provided, Exemplary Outpost. It was an accurate title, but it lacked the poetry of the other titles on the list. Titles like Into That Silent Sea and In the Shadow of the Moon. I'm not sure that we quite lived up to that standard with Homesteading Space, but we made our best effort. Even though it meant giving up the privilege of titling this volume, Heather and I were quite happy to go along with the name the publisher had suggested for this book, Bold They Rise. It was, quite literally, poetic, taken from the poem by series editor Colin Burgess that appears as the epigraph. When we first read the poem, very early on in the process of writing this volume, we pictured the title as being about the space shuttles themselves, reflecting the poem's reference to winged emissaries. As the book took shape, however, we realized that was no longer true. The title had taken on a new meaning for us. Rather than being about the hardware, it was about the men and women who risked their lives to expand humankind's frontiers. And in that vein, this book owes an incredible debt of gratitude to the NASA Johnson Space Center, JSC, Oral History Project, without which it quite literally would not exist. With Homesteading Space, it was relatively easy to create a book that filled a unique niche. With a few notable exceptions, such as a handful of official NASA publications and David Shaler's Skylab, very little had been written about America's first space station. Breaking new ground was not a particular challenge. With this book, the challenge was a little greater. There are more books about the Space Shuttle program, so it was somewhat harder to create something unique. Most of the previous works, however, fall into one of 3 categories. Technical volumes, which span the entire program but include none of the human experience. Astronaut memoirs, which relate the human experience but only from one person's perspective. Or specific histories, which are more exhaustive but focus on only a limited slice of the program. Based on the overall goal of the Outward Odyssey series, a new niche we could address became clear. A book relating the human experience of the Space Shuttle program, not limited to one person's story, but including a variety of viewpoints and spanning the early years of the program. Originally, the goal was to create a homesteading space of the shuttle program, but it quickly became apparent that was a misdirected goal. Homesteading had only 3 manned missions to cover, and thus we could delve much deeper and more broadly in covering them. To attempt to write about the subject of this book in that manner would be to do either the subject or the reader a grave disservice. We needed to narrow our approach to create something that was both relevant